Okay, everyone, we'll kick things off. Thank you very much for joining us for this morning's episode of the Jisc Beyond the Technology podcast, live from Digifest 2026. Appreciate you all joining us first thing in the morning here, so thank you very much for that. So this morning's episode is going to be regarding embedding digital confidence at every level of your organization. And I'm very, very pleased this morning to be joined by Alicia Owen, who is the Senior Digital Education Specialist at the Manchester Metropolitan University, and Elpiniki Smith, who is the Senior Learning Technologist at University Academy 1992. So thank you very much, Alicia and Elpiniki, for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
How are we doing this morning?
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, good.
Fueled by coffee and confidence?
Yes. Coffee at least.
Just kicking in.
yeah. Okay, no.
Fantastic. So Alicia, I'll start with you. Can you talk to us a little bit about your role at your institution, please?
Okay, so I'm part of the digital education team in the Centre for Learning Enhancement and Educational Development at Manchester Met, and our remit is to support staff with embedding technology to enhance learning, teaching and assessment.
Fantastic. Elpiniki, and you?
Yeah, so I'm the Senior Learning Technologist for UA 92, and part of my job is building the skills for our staff and our students to be able to build their digital capabilities and be confident and comfortable in using digital technologies.
Fantastic. So I'll stick with you just to sort of kick things off. What prompted you to actually start using the Discovery tool in its infancy?
So we wanted something that would be supporting reflection for our staff and our students, something that is non-judgmental, because a lot of the times when you ask for staff to do a kind of review of what they know, and same for students, they feel like judged that they're not good enough. So the Discovery tool is non-judgmental, and also it gives the benefit of having resources available straight after. So if you see that you are lacking some skills in a certain area, you have resources straight away that you can go and upskill yourself. And also it would give me a good opportunity to see what skills are missing, and I could target and focus those areas for our staff and our students.
Brilliant. Alicia, same for you?
Yeah, same. I think initially we went with the tool sort of post-pandemic and responded to feedback from students, sometimes about the digital confidence of their tutors and the impact that was potentially having on their experience. And then since then we've been using it with staff and students.
Yeah, and how does it sort of fit into your wider digital capability and digital transformation strategy?
Yeah, well, it fits really nicely with our education strategy. So our team in particular promote and support the strategy for digitally enhanced learning, teaching and assessment. And within there, one of the key principles is around championing staff and student digital skills. But the other elements of the education strategy link really nicely. For example, providing an outstanding student experience, a future-focused curriculum, supported and empowered staff, so that speaks nicely to using it with staff. And then also, within our IT and digital strategy, there's a strong focus on upskilling all staff and students. And then now we've got an AI strategy, and in there some of the core principles and targets are around embedding AI literacy, and that the tool is actually supporting us with that.
Fantastic. Now, Elpiniki, same for you at University Academy 92?
So we are quite a new university, so our digital strategy is still, let's say, under construction. But I've been a huge fan of the digital capabilities framework even before we had the tool, because it gives us a common language to assess where people are at in terms of their digital skills. For example, there are people who think, they're really good with technology. There'll always be someone who knows how to use the software, but they might really be lacking skills in terms of digital wellness. So with the digital framework and the Discovery tool, we can map those areas, and people can be more confident in understanding what it is that they need to develop.
So what impact has the tool had on not just the student experience, but staff experience as well across your organisation?
Our staff uptake, because we only introduced it in November last year, has been quite slow at the moment. We have more experience with students, so it is quite early days, but it has prompted some really good conversations around what digital skills are, what they need to develop, what they need to use for our students during their studies in university and beyond, and for our staff, essentially, what do they need to do in order to be competent in today's world where digital skills are really up there.
And I guess as a newer organisation, it's really good to be having those conversations now and developing that.
Absolutely, yes.
Fantastic. Alicia, same for you?
Yeah, we've got probably more staff using it than you have. We've got more staff, but it's
Not that it's competition or anything.
No. We've got quite a bit of student usage and quite a bit of staff usage, and in general the feedback is that people find it a really useful way of being able to reflect on their own skills, and then they have that signposting towards resources that could help them to upskill. From an institutional point of view, it's quite useful to then be able to look at aggregated data, either across the whole institution or at department level, and sometimes to check that you're on the right track with particular initiatives or interventions, but also to identify support needs and think about targeting training and resources around particular capabilities that potentially people need support with.
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit, but how have you noticed its impacted sort of confidence and engagement levels for both staff and students, or just general users at this stage so far?
Yeah, so we've, in general, we've got good feedback from people, and from students. I think what they appreciate is it. I think one academic colleague said it was helpful in splitting out digital literacy and being able to unpick with the students what they're actually talking about and identify those individual skills and supporting them to be able to articulate back the skills that they've developed. So that's obviously helpful from an employability point of view. And for students, it's a bit of a mix of we have some academic programs where colleagues are embedding it as part of the program, in particular perhaps in level 4, and if there's a study skills module with a focus on digital skills, and some other areas where it's embedded at a later date, and then perhaps look at a different question set. And some of our support services are making use of it with students as well, for example, careers and the library. I've gone off track a bit there. What was the question? Sorry about that.
That's all right. Confidence and engagement level.
Yes, okay. And then, and for staff, we... first of all, we were targeting it at academic staff because the focus was, their skills to be able to then support the students. And again, the feedback is that it's quite useful for them just taking a step back and reflecting on where they are with the digital skills and what they could do differently and what they might like to try, and suggesting those steps that they could take to upskill. We've got it as part of our team. We've got a digital educator course, so it's a first step on that course actually, and that works really well where our student is a staff member, takes the question set, usually the main overall digital capabilities question set, and then based on the report has a discussion with a mentor and identifies things that they'd like to try. So that's really nice, and I think it's a bit of a mix. We've got people using it in a supported way, so for example, the academic supporting the students or career service, or us supporting academic colleagues. But also there's quite a bit of people just finding it on their own. Probably a lot of our usage for students comes via something called the RISE programme, which is an extracurricular programme for students where they can get recognition basically for engaging with extracurricular activities. So that could be asynchronous online courses or in-person training sessions. There is a study pack in there around digital capabilities, and the discovery tool is embedded there. So we know that a lot of our usage for students has come via that track. So it's a bit of a mix of people finding it themselves when they want to go and upskill, and other areas where people are being supported with it.
Yeah. And not to be too leading with the question, but I'm assuming the feedback for that's been quite positive so far.
Yes, yeah. We've currently got a pilot programme where it's being used with professional services, and that's part of a digital skills framework, and that's early days, and feedback we're getting is generally positive. There's some questions around, perhaps we could do something more role specific, but then I think that's on us. That's something we can look at as a team who are working on that to suggest the resources and the learning paths and so on that would be useful for people in particular roles.
Fantastic, thanks for that. And Elpiniki, same to you, I guess, and your students, sort of their confidence and their engagement and their feedback so far.
Yeah, so as I said, for us it's still early days, but the main impact is awareness for both staff and students of what the digital skills are and what they need to develop. But because we're also an Adobe Creative Campus, we've got body swaps, we have other software, it also gives them a bigger picture of how everything fits in well together.
Yeah.
So it's not, we don't have just distinctively, just Adobe Express sessions. They can see how it all helps to develop their digital skills. And also for staff, understanding that students, we do call them digital natives, and they are, if we consider, the fact that they have grown up with technology, but we mistake that for students knowing everything about technology, and they don't. They are good at certain things, but they're not good at other things like managing their time or, digital wellness and things like that. So it's also making our staff aware that our students still need to develop those skills, and it helps them embed that then in the curriculum and develop those skills for the students.
Yeah, and I guess that encouragement to develop skills sort of leads into the next question I have, which is what strategies have you found effective to get people to actually use it?
So from last year, I started doing inductions with students because we found that when students arrive at university, they do like the very, very basic skills, like knowing how to use the VLE or knowing how to use the calendars, their emails, because they're not used to that kind of thing. So I started doing that last year. So when we implemented the discovery tool, it was natural for me to just embed that at induction. So we have 5 entry points. So at every induction, I have a session with the students where we talk about the discovery tool, we talk about the digital skills, they complete the questionnaire, and it gives them a good idea of what it is that they need to develop, and of course the resources that they need to use after. In the same session, of course, I do Adobe stuff and other technologies that we have, so they get a bigger picture of digital skills. So that has worked really, really well for us. In terms of staff, as I said, we haven't really had a massive uptake because I've been concentrating more on students, and there are quite a lot of restrictions in terms of time for staff, having the time to do the questionnaire, even though it's not very long, as you know. But it's always, I don't have the time to do this, to develop that. So we are still working on that. And my aim is to talk a little bit more with HR inductions and try and make that part of the induction process for our staff as well, just like it is with our students, because it is quite effective embedding it into a program as opposed to asking them to just do it whenever they have time to do it.
That's a great idea, considering obviously famously not necessarily a very time-rich sector or industry. Alicia, same for you. What
the same. So we have got it embedded in an induction module called Getting Ready to Learn, and there's a section in there on digital skills. So we point to the different question sets, for example, to the new students question set. But I think, in general, there is usually more uptake when an academic colleague is suggesting to students that they do it and giving them some class time to do that. And the same for staff, actually, because I know we've had more engagement when we're running, for example, the digital educator course, or we have sessions that are part of our communities of practice. In the past, we've had a community practice called Digital Me, and it's changed a bit now, it's Digital Futures. But when you give staff that time to engage with the tool and think about it, you obviously get more engagement. And then I mentioned the professional services digital skills framework. So that now is being run as a series of sessions where colleagues go and talk to a whole department, and they do one of the question sets in that time. And they, in that way they have that time, because otherwise, you're right, it's really difficult for people to say, set aside the time to do it.
Yeah.
But if you've got team leaders on board or academics for students, then it's a lot easier to make that happen.
Yeah, I'm presuming as well, just moving on from that, but also touching on what you were talking about in terms of actually making use of the time that we have and trying to get people on board. Has that been a significant challenge? Has there been any other challenges in terms of implementing the tool?
I think it's probably more so at Manchester Met is having that sort of coordinated approach.
Mm-hmm.
And initially, as I mentioned, we started off targeting academic colleagues and the students. But I think, if you get a bit of coordination between colleagues who are helping to embed it. So we've got a course that's all about the digital capabilities framework, points them to the question set, and other resources which support academic colleagues with embedding digital skills into the curriculum. But in terms of marrying it up with the wider university, the challenge has been making sure that we are using the same language. So, one person's not looking for skills, the other's looking for capabilities, and others looking for fluency. And then thinking about the practical side, so things like the resource cards. So if you've used it, you probably know there's resource cards on there that are provided or curated by Jisc, but you also have the opportunity to put in institutionally owned resource cards. So it's just making sure that you talk to the other people who've got a stake in this, and making sure that, there's not 5 cards pointing to the same resource and it's framed in a different way. It's just having a conversation, basically, and making it make sense.
Yeah, and Elpiniki, I guess from your side as well, because you haven't necessarily been using it all that long, I guess there's a certain level of it sort of just getting used to it and adjusted to it as one of the main challenges.
Yes, I think in terms of staff, I'm very, very enthusiastic about the discovery tool. I think it's a brilliant tool, and I think that shows when I talk to our staff about it. However, I speak fluent academic. I don't speak fluent professional services, so that can be an issue in terms of getting professional services people on board, because they go, well, how does that relate to me? How does that relate to my role? So it's something that I realised that I need a different approach with professional services staff, as what I do with academics. But we are still learning, and we'll overcome that obstacle, if you like. But we just need to target professional service staff slightly differently than academics and students. So yeah.
So how's the tool helped you to understand your students and potentially staff as well, their digital capability needs?
I mean, it's brilliant because it gives you a breakdown. I mean, it's all anonymous, as you know, but it gives you a good breakdown of what skills are lacking in certain departments, both for staff and for students. So having that dashboard, and it also it compares it with a sector as well. So you know that if you are, better than everybody else, obviously, that's what we're aiming
modest
for.
At this institution.
I know, aren't we? Yeah, we're aiming high, But yeah, so because it gives you all of this, and you can target resources. So if you see that a particular department is lacking in specific skills, you can target those skills in that department. And it saves me time because I'm the only learning technologist at UA92. So I can create specific resources to target specific areas, as opposed to trying to do everything for everyone and spread myself very thin. So I know, the media department will need that, and then I'll target that. Sport department will need something else. I'll do something else. So it's a massively, massively helpful tool in terms of organizing my time as well, and understanding where we lack knowledge as an institution, and upskilling our staff and our students in that respect.
Fantastic. Alicia, same for you?
Yeah, same. But we've also been able to, having used it a bit longer, we've been able to use it to sort of sense check that we're on the right track with things. For example, our AI guidance for staff and students. We've been able to use the data from the question set on using AI and generative AI to check that, it all makes sense. So, for example, most of the scores for us, we were showing us above the benchmark, which was good, and in particular around responsible use of AI, which is, one of the things we were really concerned about. So going forward, as we come up to refreshing our guidance for staff and students this summer, we'll be able to look at the data and identify any areas where people, feel like they need support, and make sure that we're giving them that support in our refresh guidance and training offer.
I guess that benchmarking is really important as well to give you an idea of what to focus on, right?
Yeah. And the other thing we haven't mentioned, and probably, this has probably been less relevant if you've been using it last time, but you can also compare over time. So you can either look at individual dates, but you can compare year on year now. So that's really helpful as well, to be able to just check that things are moving in the right direction rather than backwards.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's helpful as well.
Sure. So keeping on with the topic of the future, what are you looking forward to enhancing or developing next, thanks to the Discovery tool?
I think for us, it's just making sure that we're working together with colleagues on the professional services side for that digital skills framework, and to continue to work with colleagues in other professional services departments like the library and careers to make sure that we are surfacing the right resources and training and support for both staff and students. So when they take their question set and they get that personalised report, that they are, seeing the Manchester Met offer as well as all the, the curated resources, so they know there's that support and the right guidance and so on. I think that's probably our focus for the time being. Yeah.
Fantastic. And what about for you, Elpiniki?
So a lot of our programs are going through revalidation at the moment. So it's an excellent opportunity for us to embed the tool within the different modules. We have what's called the 92 program, which is developing different skills for our students, and it will allow us to map the modules. And when it's embedded from the get-go, it is much easier for our staff and our students to see what skills they're lacking and how they can target specific modules to upskill our students in that respect. I've also started this year the Digital Champions program with our students, and the aim for that is that they complete the discovery tool, they see the areas that they like, then they work on them, and as they progress through the levels, then they become the knowledgeable others, and they offer peer support to our students, and then they can help other students with areas that they are lacking as well. And of course, we have the communities of practice within the academic and, well, now professional services staff as well, where we are trying to get together and understand what the issues are with different technologies. So, some people are scared of trying new technologies. Some people might have other struggles. So we come together in a safe space and discuss, the areas of development that we need. And excuse me. What I'm trying to focus on is focusing on one area at a time, as opposed to tackle all of them at the same time. It makes it easier for me in terms of creating resources for staff, and it makes it easier for staff to kind of be attending something that we know that everyone is attending, so they can have these conversations after about how did you find this, can you help me with that? So this is kind of what's coming up in the future.
And just to start wrapping up, what advice would you give to an institution that's either thinking of implementing the tool or just in their infancy in terms of utilising it?
Go for it. Absolutely, yes. I think I do think it's a brilliant tool. I don't know how else you would get that information on what skills your staff and your students have. If you've listened to the conversation so far, obviously, you can learn from our mistakes, if you like, of how to target professional services or how to target students, embedded in the curriculum for your staff or induction. I would say just go for one theme at a time. It will make it much, much easier for everyone to understand what the different dimensions are and how they relate. Connect everything in terms of academic staff, connect everything to development, probably the UKPSF, and so they understand how everything fits in there as well. Don't know if I've forgotten something in terms of what advice I could give. I think if people get in touch, I'm sure I will have a lot more advice to give them. But
go for it. It was a very effective review.
Absolutely go for it. Yes.
I'd recommend going for it. And I think you're right about aligning it to existing frameworks, for example, professional standards framework, and then embedding the language of the Jisc framework and the discovery tool within everything else you're doing. So, for example, our CPD offer at the moment, we always try and highlight how the session will help improve particular digital capabilities, and we're even doing that with community practice sessions now. Other bits of advice, I think what you were talking about earlier and embedding it from the beginning within academic programs is really important. What you really need is a program approach. If you're doing this for students and you're embedding it within academic courses, you need that program approach so that usage and skills development is scaffolded across the levels, and it's not just something suddenly appears in level 6 when people need to get a job and they suddenly need to think about skills. It needs to be there from the beginning. So if you have got other frameworks or graduate attributes that it speaks to, that's great, but you can align that. We've got our graduate attributes, and digital is one of those. other bits of advice: speak to everyone that's got a say in this or stake in it, and try and have that shared vision for how the tool is going to be used. So you're not duplicating information, or so you don't have inconsistent information on the intranet or on the website or whatever it is. And ideally, get senior buy-in if possible, and get it aligned, if not written into your strategy. But if you have got strategy and policy documents that it aligns to, that's really helpful for selling it to colleagues and to students, really.
Brilliant.
Giving the rationale.
If I may add one more thing, one approach that I find quite useful is the what's in it for me. So if you're trying to get the discovery tool, explain to the decision makers what's in it for them, why it's good for them to have it. And when you implement it, explain to your staff what's in it for them. And that's the approach I usually take with staff. So it's the fear of missing out, like, oh, if I don't do it, I'm behind the sector,
Yeah.
And same for students. If they understand why we're doing this and why it's beneficial, then you're more likely to get that buy-in from all the stakeholders.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, the two of you. If anyone has any further questions, where can people find you?
I don't think our email address is on there, but on LinkedIn.
Yeah, they can find us on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
There won't be another Elpiniki Smith, I can assure you about that.
I feel that, yeah.
I think there might be a few Alicia Owens, but hopefully you recognise me. And it'll say Manchester Met. I think I'm the only one at Manchester Met, which is a miracle, really, given the size of the place. So,
and of course,
get in touch.
if they have the Digifest app, they can find us there. They can
send us
contact
a
us
message.
via there as well.
Happy to chat. Yeah.
Well, Alicia, Elpiniki, thank you very much for joining me this morning. And everyone, thank you very much for joining us this morning as well.